There are a lot of meetings today, so it's like me on my own trying to do stuff. So anyway, I appreciate everybody's patience as I get things sorted out. So, um, Maggie, if you want to introduce yourself to maybe some of the new folks, and then we'll get going on the agenda.
I see mostly familiar names, but I am Maggie Sayer, and I am the CEO down at Keys Federal Credit Union in Key West, Florida. And I am the chair of the task force that you guys are all on.
Perfect. Thanks everybody for coming. We'll talk a little bit today about the gross negligence piece. Again, putting that in quotations because we do have language. And Jonathan Cadulis is on the phone with us or on the Zoom call with us today and can walk a little bit through that if we need. We have a communication rollout plan. You guys do not need to like approve the dates or anything. I just want you to know we have a plan. This is what it looks like. This is how we're going to hopefully roll it out. And then we're going to do a little bit of discussion about how are we engaging the cards and the payment servicers before setting a next meeting date. So our objectives today are pretty straightforward. We want to look at the gross negligence language and then have you all provide any guidance moving forward. And then just looking at the communication plans and the timeline for how we want to release things. I will give you guys a little bit of a preview. My feeling, just so the group knows, and I'm open to discussion on this, but I don't know that we want to do it at the end of December. I feel like it might get swallowed up by the holidays. So I would advocate for doing it after the first of the year. But we can talk through that during this conversation. And then later we'll talk more about meeting dates and everything. So as we get going, I'm going to put this on the screen. I know we asked everybody to take a look at this, and then I'm going to turn it over to Maggie to open it up for conversation. And then also Jonathan Cadulis is here if he wants to chime in on what he was thinking. We had a conversation with him about this, about how we could make this more evergreen. Jonathan, could you jump in real quick and let folks kind of know what you were working with when you put this together? And then Maggie, I'll turn it over to you for discussion.
Okay.
Yeah, hey, good afternoon. Can you hear me okay, Matt? Good?
Yeah, we're good. You sound great.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. So Matt and I had a brief call and first let me say it's nice to meet everybody and appreciate you all allowing me to contribute in some way. Matt and I had a call about, potentially revising the Reg E, and he at first used the term some type of gross misconduct and of course working with so many on this call and so many credit unions just trying to think of language, in my opinion, and I'll just be frank, I'd love to hear your comments, and I'm not married to this language and happy to work with you all or anybody to try to get this exactly where we need. But my problem, or at least my thought, at least two things. The first is that the term, gross misconduct or reckless conduct in the law, those are factual questions. No conduct is truly defined as gross until it's determined that way by a judge or jury. And I think what we want is a standard that exists before we get to the litigation stage. So having something that required, in a sense, a court or a jury to make a determination kind of doesn't do us any good because we're if a member is engaged in some bad act or some reckless act, we want a way to deny the dispute now, not in 2 years after litigating. And then secondly, I wanted language because we all now, in today's world, you have the smishing and the phishing attacks, which are common. But I don't know if we used those two terms 4 years ago, and who knows what we're going to be looking at in 4 years from now. So I tried to use or create language that provides a standard that we can, if it's appropriate, deny disputes at the dispute stage. And secondly, include some language that gives us flexibility to deny disputes when appropriate today, but also with whatever changes there may be in technology, account compromises, anything in the future. And as Matt stated, that's the term I used, evergreen, something we can use moving forward.
Jonathan, thanks. This is Maggie. Just to clarify for everybody, I believe that Jonathan is outside counsel for the league. Is that correct, Jonathan?
Yeah, outside
Okay.
counsel, and I have at least seen 10 or more credit unions on this call that we work with too. So quite a number of people. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted the credentials to go with that.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
So so I was passed the same verbiage from Jonathan to Matt, and then Matt had a few people at the league review it, and then I reviewed it. And really, I think the input that we're looking for from the task force is, could you be pleased with this? Could you work with this if this were to be the language that were used in a modernization of Reg E? And where I want to clarify is that, we can put this forth and we might get 6 iterations back of what somebody's willing to honor or go with. But if this were presented and this is what the reg said today, would this work for your institution? Would this be helpful? Would this provide more clarity? And Jonathan used the word evergreen. We're seeing with the CTR modernization and the board modernization that we need something so that we're not trying to do this again in 5 years or 15 years or 47 years, as the case may be here. So I want to open it up and come off mute and have a conversation about whether or not this would work while Jonathan's on the phone and Matt's on the phone.
So I'll start. Oh, go ahead, Rochelle.
I'm sorry about that, Debbie. I just have a question because just from the outskirts, the language looks great, but it doesn't quite clarify. I think the issue that we're having is how would we interpret this if, let's say, the scammer is impersonating the credit union and they are sending them funds. Right now, our interpretation in Reg E says, hey, if someone is, I'm calling from Georgia Zone, I need you to give me your blood type, DNA, social card number, and everything. We're liable because you gave that under duress. How could we adapt that to that? This only just says that they initiated, but if they said that the credit union told me to do it, how do we get past that?
Well, I think in this II section, it's, provided input too, is a, in that instance, the member is providing input too, and they are providing credentials and they are providing approvals to authenticate, including, and I think the verbiage including but not limited to, it does what Jonathan's talking about. But Jonathan, go ahead and speak for yourself. I don't want to speak for you.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's a great question. And at least, and Rochelle, you may have some different circumstances and we may want to discuss, at least in all of the, account takeovers or compromises that I know of where you have someone pretending to be the credit union, almost always that involves being able to take over that person's online or mobile banking, and through that compromise, it has your member providing some type of credentials, and usually, or most commonly now, that's some type of multi-factor authentication. And with that being the case, I drafted that to fall under this. So, I guess the takeaway, if this language is eventually adopted, is everyone, and I think this is wise today, whether or not this language is put in place for your mobile online banking, you definitely want to add a multi-factor authentication step into your login so that, if there is somebody impersonating the credit union, it then triggers the multi-factor authentication PIN to your member, who then communicates it to the fraudster, which would then have them fall under this proposed language.
Okay. And there's one more to add to that. Now, we have also instances where they did not provide their online banking credentials, but they did give them the physical debit card and PIN. Would that protect us as well if this was put into, hey, Georgia Zone called me and told me to give me their debit card to put it under my doorstep and give me their PIN, and I gave it to them because I thought this was Georgia Zone.
Yeah, I think, two things in that. I think where it says provides input or assisted the transfer would capture that scenario. But also the current language of Reg E, and don't hold me to this, I don't have it in front of me, but the current language of Reg E says that if you provide somebody your card to use, that then falls out of, the Reg E dispute territory. So, based on what you're describing, I think the current commentary would exclude that as a recoverable dispute because they gave that person their card. But yeah, in this proposed language, I think it does address that with that input or assisted language.
And also but not limited to, and then the personal identification number being listed. I think, that tying that back to the actual PIN language is helpful also.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I just have a quick question, Jonathan. Thank you so much for drafting this. I have a question relating to the biometric identifiers, because by definition, that could be your voice print or whatever, and somebody answering the phone may not even give permission to take a voice print. And right, they've recorded that. And so that wouldn't be the member helping facilitate that, right? Because they didn't give them permission to record their voice or manipulate their voice or whatever. So how would we get around that piece of the biometric, through voice authentication? Because we have voice recognition software as well. So I'm just curious how we would get around that, meaning the member participated in that biometric feed, if you will, intentionally, knowingly, right, or whatever. And then my second question would be, how do we still get around the definition in 3, which is through fraud or robbery, right? So those are just my two questions.
Yes. There's so few credit unions that have really adopted some type of biometric system that actually is engaged in providing active security. So I may want you to speak more about how that's involved. But I guess, if the credit union, or if the member were to speak to a fraudster who recorded that call, then use some type of post-generative AI processing to then recreate the voice to call your credit union to have a transaction conducted. I would say is kind of different. That's true fraud. And I think that probably would fall out of this exception, because that's really not, in my mind, the fraud that we're looking to prevent, because it truly wasn't conducted with the negligence of your member, so to speak. So I think that would fall outside of this commentary language we drafted. Or some, and there may be some other avenue or facts involved. So if it's different, I'd like you to speak to that. But the way this language works, the subsection 1 reads as it does currently, where it says access device by means of robbery or fraud. But what I tried to do is make an exception of that robbery or fraud, which isn't there now, where that robbery or fraud was facilitated by the member's participation. So kind of subsection 2 was operating as a qualifier or an exception to that subsection 1.
And Deborah, maybe on the biometric question, if you could lay out like a data flow of what happens, when in your instance is the authentication that's taking place, it must surely be more than voice. It would have to be they're calling from the right number. So I think if I know for me personally, and maybe Jonathan and Matt, if I understood more of what your system is looking at as far as that authentication taking place, then because truly biometrics aren't the be all end all of authentication. They're usually part of a multi-factor authentication. Like it's the face, but it's also the member number and the password that have been entered, and the face, and it's going to whatever. So if I'm not doubting what you're saying, but we don't use voice authentication. So if I understood more about what the procedure was, or the process was, of how that member might claim fraud using the voice biometrics, I do think it's a great question, because we're going to be, biometrics are being sold right now to credit unions as being the answer, or one of the answers. And right behind it, we're hearing all about how AI can take the place of all of the biometrics. So it is a good question. If you could either clarify or write it out, I think maybe we could make sure that it's included in the language.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think because I just read things a little differently, because I'm a lawyer too. So I think that just clicks in my brain a little differently. And where I was getting it is because it says provided one or more of these things. So in reality, we could decline it if it passed that first stage, right? And got through biometrics. So we use it based on when you call in, our AI learns that we learn your voice and different things that you say, expressions, and then it is used as part. You're right, it's not 100%, but when I see one or more, including these things, it just made me concerned that if we tried to deny it based on anything, they could have got the other two things from
Dark web or
whatever.
But
and
is
then
it an
used AI
electronic?
to-
Is it a Regi transaction type that you're allowing based on the voice? I think that's where I understand if somebody's calling in to do a transfer and they're using their voice and that's their authentication, but yeah,
I think that's where I was going to, is trying to figure out how we would use this to dispute one. Like, where would
Yeah.
biometrics come into play to dispute providing the member a credit? And I think that's where my mind was trying to figure out why we used biometrics.
Yeah, I would say, Deborah, you may be on the cutting edge of fraud, so congratulations on that.
I don't know about all that.
Yeah. But if you would, like Maggie mentioned, if you would share the kind of data flow or fact pattern you're looking at, and let's maybe talk about it after this call, because the very purpose of what we're trying to do is make certain it incorporates what the cutting edge is today and what tomorrow may bring.
Okay.
Who else is out there and has some commentary? Thanks, Deborah and Rochelle.
I have something that I would like to add, and
Go ahead,
maybe
Nancy.
just a question about, okay, the goal here is to try to put some liability back on the members. Yes.
Mhm. Yes.
So is there any need to, in this language, put something about their responsibility to protect their devices, as far as having some kind of virus protection, or for remote access and things like that? That's where we do
Honestly,
have a BioCatch. We use BioCatch for our online banking, and it records the member's movement in online banking. And it detects remote access when it's actually not the member, when they've actually taken over their phone, basically. So is there not some need for us to put some language in here about protecting yourself, basically?
I don't know that we could, Nancy, because there's a price attached to it, and I don't think you can require the member to expense a firewall or any kind of security protection. I don't know. I just don't know that you can you know, something that cost is a monetary. Sure, we can say, you know, protect your stuff and, you know,
Yeah.
keep it hidden or whatever. But I don't know if there's a cost associated with what we're asking. I don't know that they'd buy that.
Well, and I also think when I think about regulation versus, let's say, disclosure, um, it's been 47 years since this regulation has been looked at. And the word virus has only been around for maybe 25 of those. I mean, not the word virus, but the technology
Right.
of the virus. So I understand what you're saying. And Jonathan, maybe there's some way to, I just think the point of modernizing Reggie is, you know, you said, are we trying to put some of the liability back on the member? I don't think that's all that we're trying to do. I think we're trying to make this more of a cooperative, a collective, because I don't always think it's friendly fraud. I think sometimes, but I do think the onus
Yes.
needs to be more on the member. And I don't know, law is not my thing. So Jonathan, you can take over that one.
Yeah, I yeah, I think that through. I mean, we could potentially put, you know, or make other reasonable, um, or take other reasonable precautions, something along those lines. You have to, you know, I worry about setting up a standard that then you have to kind of litigate, you know, post dispute, so to speak. You know, I will say when you're talking about, remote software, remote logins, or somebody compromising your member's device, whether it's computer or mobile phone, that's probably one of the reasons, again, that you want to mandate security features like where it logs off a member after some period of inactivity. You always require multi-factored authentication when there's a login, so that even if there is a device takeover, you know, you're still going to have security protocols in place. But that's a great point, and let me think about whether or not including some type of additional uh, terminology like reasonable precautions or something would be a benefit.
Because then my concern is and maybe Jonathan's, I'm not going to speak for him, but putting in language that is specifically not specific, you know, like it says who, okay, well,
Like the regulators do us.
yeah, right. Like, oh, well, I had such and such virus scanner and it wasn't updated, but I had it installed. So, or I had spyware and it was sold to me as virus software. And, I just wonder if we start going down a very similar rabbit hole with ambiguity that we are under now with Reggie the way it sits now, where we're trying to understand things like gross negligence. That's my only thought. But Nancy, that's a good question. Anybody else?
This is Joe. You can limit access to your online banking platform if it's through an app to people who have the most recent operating systems or most recent version of iOS or Android. So you can do it that way. I don't know whether that would help with someone who's accessing online banking through an internet browser, though. But if you restricted access to your online banking app to people who had the most recent operating system, that usually includes up-to-date antivirus protection. So that's, that's one way to attack it. That's not legislative.
Good point.
Yeah, Maggie, Jeff Owens has his hand up. Jeff, if you want to jump in.
Go for it. I can't see that.
No worries, I'm looking.
I was just gonna say, and Joe, I think you just alluded to it. The idea is willful or intentional. This is all fact specific. Willful, intentional participation. Um, I think that's clear, and we can come up with a whole bunch of, because we see it, it's just evolving every day, the types of fraud. But if someone is an active participant and perpetuating, then that's a grounds to that fit this exception. Um, you just have to look at it in the totality of the circumstances. One thing that I worry about, and Jonathan, you tell me, or Matt, if we were, well, first off, I think if you don't have it, you should, some sort of clause in your membership agreement that speaks on security. So you already have that right, or ability to restrict someone's access, like you said, Joe, where depending on whatever OS you have, you restrict access to it. Um, but what I'm worried about is if we were to include any additional requirements on behalf of, in our case, the member, could that trigger a SBREFA, or the in looking at the Regulatory Flexibility Act, it could add some costs. And when that happens, what we're trying to accomplish is drawn out even further, and it may not happen. And so by doing this is a path of least resistance. It's pretty simple, logical actually. So there's no need to incorporate new systems to determine if they're meeting certain security criteria. Because you got to think about that, the legislative part. We want to make this as easy for someone to pass as possible.
Yeah, good point, Jeff. I think that's really what we were, what I was trying to mention at the beginning is this a great enough start that we're willing to move forward with it so that we can get feedback? Because inevitably there's going to be feedback. There's going to be pushback. There's going to be somebody that wants to put their stamp on the wording. I'm certain of it. Matt, correct me if I'm wrong. There's going to be adjustments to this that I think we'll want to come back and look at. But are we good with, if this was final, does this actually help us? And I feel like in our instance, it does. It would clarify the II section alone would clarify a lot for us, but I can't speak for everybody. So
And also we have the commentary that can expound upon this as well, which is what I believe, if this makes it to that level, it would be wise for them to add commentary to provide some sort of illustration of what this exception, the spirit of this exception, what we're trying to capture.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jeff. We can actually make that request because for folks on the call, the goal is to get this to the CFPB. It would need to go kind of through their rulemaking process. And they're the ones that would have control over this. And so we can ask them about adding commentary to this. What we've been asked, just from our standpoint, whenever we brought this stuff up, and what we're being told in DC is, we hear you guys have problems, come to us with solutions. So if we come to them with this solution and they're like, hey, we kind of like this, to Maggie's point, I feel like we're going to get some tweaks and adjustments from other places, because once we get this out there in the world, we haven't seen a proposal like this from the banking side, from our national credit union folks. So there will be some folks who want tweaks. They're going to have the same questions that you guys have, likely. Part of this is getting the conversation sparked and getting people to motivate and maybe get something done on this. Because I feel like, and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, I know the CFPB is a little defanged right now, but if they're doing anything, they're knocking down regulations. And if we have a chance, in an opening, this would be the opportunity to kind of run forward.
So Matt, that's probably a pretty good segue to the next. If there are no other comments, no other commentary, I think we'd like to move forward. And then what are the next steps? So I'll mute for just a second and make sure that nobody else has anything to say. No hands, Matt?
I don't see anything, so
Okay.
um,
So you want to cover this?
yeah, I can run through this real quickly for everybody. Pay no attention to all the various tabs I have open. So we've kind of folded this into two buckets, right? So one would be essentially a tiered communications rollout. There'd be a tier one and a tier two. And in the tier one, we're looking at audience and then we're looking at what we're distributing, right? So the first audience we're calling this kind of like internal folks, like people who are already in the industry. So you're talking league members. It would go out on Insider, on our Beeler brief, on social. We may even send out an email on it. America's Credit Unions, Acul, NASCUS, other leagues, trade press. It's kind of like an internal focus. And then our tier two would be where our government affairs folks would come in. And this would be IBI talking to our federal friends on the banking committee or to all of our folks in the footprint who are congressional folks, senators, all those kind of things. And so we're going to break this out. And what I don't want anybody to focus on is kind of the dates of it. Like the dates are TBD. Like I said at the beginning, I really feel like if we do this after the first of the year, we've got a better shot at getting more eyeballs. Kind of feel like if we try to rush it by the end of the December, we're going to get swallowed up by the holidays. And just so folks know, in both of these pieces that we send out, we have like this a brief, and then we also have a press release that have both been kind of approved and ready to go by internally by us for the most part. They've been edited by the comms team. I've went through them, and they're very straightforward. So when we send out stuff to folks, it would be this brief, which is, and I can send it, and I think I can send this all to you after the call, but it's very straightforward of like, here are the demographics of the survey. Here are some of the key survey findings. It's all stuff you guys have seen before, but we're just putting it straight in front and center. So that way, this is the stuff that they see first, as opposed to sending out the whole analysis, which having them read through seems like a bad idea to me. But giving them the good nuggets up front, I feel like is the best way to do that. One thing I wanted to ask this task force about, I highlighted these two questions here. The law enforcement question can be a little tricky, and I want to ask the task force, we do not have to include this. None of this has gone out publicly. If we don't want to talk about the law enforcement angle with survey numbers and things like that, we don't have to. But I put it to y'all, if you want to have one of these in there, or both of them, please let us know. Or if you want to take them out, I'm completely open, and we're completely open as a league to how we want to handle this as a task force.
I don't think it impacts or is as impactful for Reg E. I mean, I think what this illustrates is how hard it is to prosecute more than anything. And honestly, I worry about creating friction. We don't want to tick off our law enforcement friends. So
with the not very effective.
yeah,
Yeah,
y'all are
that's what I
not
was
doing,
thinking.
Very
y'all are
effective at all.
really bad at this. That's not what we want to convey.
I think the
Yeah.
only reason we would want to include law enforcement as a grouping is if we thought that it would provide value to the offering, and I don't think in this instance it does. By that I mean if we could prove that by changing the Regi language or modernizing it, that it was going to somehow benefit law enforcement or make it fewer law enforcement hours spent, sort of like the CTR limit, like we did with that verbiage. I think we would want to include it, but the way that this is written, I do think is going to provide friction among our partners, and I don't really think that that's probably a good idea for us.
I agree.
That was my inclination, but I wanted to at least put it out there and let folks debate it. Because I could see like what you said, Maggie, where highlighting that we work with them a lot is good, but the way this is kind of written is a
Worded.
little, see, it's gonna come across a little harsh without context. So
Not very effective at all.
so this is, like I say, I can send this out after the call for everybody to take a look at, but it's all the top level stuff. And then what we also have paired with this is a press release that's been essentially drafted up and ready to go. We have some quotes. I know, Maggie, we reached out to you for some
Yep.
approval on things. Samantha has a quote in here. I can also send this out. But what I generally want to focus on for everybody is just the cadence of what we're going to do is sending out the survey brief and the press release together and having it broken up into in those two different tiers, as I was showing there in the beginning. So let me pull it back up real quick so you all can see the idea just being the audiences. Is there anybody have questions about what this cadence looks like? We can obviously do the dates later. And is there anybody who is concerned about not getting this out before the end of the year? Because I'm open to that. I just am worried about, I'll be honest, I'm just worried about people not paying attention because Christmas and Hanukkah and all the different other holidays that are going on.
I don't have an issue with waiting until after the first of the year. I think I was actually surprised at the attendance of this meeting because I think a lot of people have, this is vacation time, family time, get rid of my PTO time. So I don't have an issue with waiting until after the first of the year. The only thing I did wonder, Matt, on some of the communication is I think it's a worthwhile endeavor to include somehow, some way, someplace the members of the task force, because either by credit union name or by the name of the individual, if they wanted to be included, I think that it shouldn't go unnoticed. The fact that this group was able to get the job done or almost done relatively quickly in regulatory or governance language. So I don't know where that fits. It's just something that is kind of, I think when they were asking me for quotes, it sort of, I don't know, raised a little bit of a flag that this isn't about you. It's not about me. It's not about the league. What we've been able to do with the survey results and the task force has been a group effort. So I don't know where that fits, and you and I can talk about that offline. Or maybe Samantha has an idea, but I think it would be beneficial to know that this wasn't just a group of three people. This was a big group involved. So that's all I have.
Yeah, I like that idea. We call it out in the full analysis. I tried to call it out in the one
Okay.
pager and I ran out of room. So
Yeah.
I like the idea of that. 138 credit unions responded. We get
Yeah.
30 to 40 on the task force every month. Does
Perfect.
anybody object to would anybody have objections if we listed your credit union? And I know you may have to ask some of your CEOs, but would anybody think that there'd be an objection of we served on the task force and it's just your name, right? I don't know if that's a thing that people would have to chase down.
This is Veronica. I would say that yes, that would have to go very to the top of the food chain at my credit union. We just are very sensitive on where we put our names, because usually even when we submit comments, we usually go through trade partners, so our name is not mentioned. So I guess it depends on the capacity of how you're including our name. We would just kind of want to know, and then that decision would go up.
Yeah. It might be easier, Maggie, if we just say, 30 to 40 credit unions.
That's fine.
Yeah,
I'd like credit to go where credit's due. That's all.
I
absolutely.
appreciate that.
That's a good flag, Veronica. Thank you. I kind of had an inclination, but I always like to make sure I'm double checking my intuition. So
And I've really forgotten what's in the brief. But I guess if it's covered there, it is, the numbers are impactful alone. So,
yeah, and there are no names tied to there are no credit union names tied to the responses or anything like that. That's all very confidential.
right.
So the last thing we have for y'all, and the one of the things, oh, I went too far. So let me bring everybody back so that way we can stop sharing and everybody can see each other as we wrap up. So one of the things that we have talked about, and I've had side conversations with people. My bad. So it's the end of the year. One of the things we talked about was engaging car companies and the payment servicers. So I've had a couple conversations with people in other credit unions, and I was in Atlanta earlier this week and talked to some folks there. I wonder if how we want to do this, because I'll be honest, I've heard mixed reactions to they're not very helpful. So or they may not be interested, and I just don't know how we want to go about engaging that segment of folks. And I know we only have a few minutes left, so I just wanted to open it up to the group and see what folks are thinking and how we could go about getting them as a part of this effort.
That maybe a good start would be to ask the group, is there anyone that they know of who is particularly helpful with those card providers? So if anyone has anything very positive or someone very positive that they work with, that would be a great place to start.
Randy. Silence. I think the thought on engaging, and this goes back to one of our first meetings, engaging the cardholder industry was the amount of money that is behind the cardholder industry. Is there a benefit to them being included in this, even if it's on our coattails or us on their coattails? If we get what we want, is there a benefit to them being aligned and putting their money toward that fight? And I think that was really the only idea, Matt, because they are not super helpful. And I think that's probably more of a Samantha question, because surely it's not going to be the people that we're dealing with. It's not going to be the account reps, or they're not going to get anywhere with anything. Even that next 2-tier level of executives in the cardholder industry. At Valera, for example, I just don't think or Fiserv or whatever, Star, I just don't think that's I don't think we're going to get anywhere with those people. But maybe at Samantha's level, I don't know. Thoughts?
I got a thought. I have a thought for everything. I'm sorry, but they have deep pockets, and if somebody interprets this as decreasing revenue based on a lower amount of say fraud submissions or anything like that to your processor, just that small potential could trigger them putting money into a campaign and get ahead of us and get in front of the lawmakers and making our life very difficult. The whole idea is just reform or modernization. And with them or without them, I think we could potentially awaken a dragon, and I don't want to do that. especially coming up on Hike the Hill, if we could get this and have that momentum as we go to Hike the Hill, we're planting a seed at least, not a battle. Because I could see one of the servicers of the card fraud thinking that this could somehow affect our bottom line, and that's what I
Right.
worry about.
I mean, they're selling anti-fraud solutions, right? So,
I mean, they have a vested interest in fraud because they're making money off of us filing it, and that's what I worry about. Those unintended consequences of everything. My 2 cents.
Matt, anybody else had a hand raised?
I don't see anybody else with the hand raised. Anybody, I saw Joe come off mute, so I don't know, Joe, if you had something to say or.
No, I agree with Jeff. I think they're more likely to fight us than help us. So that's it.
So then, Matt, I think for now we're on our own. We're blazing trails or whatever.
Pariahs.
Right.
Charging the
Right.
gates.
Yes, charging the gates.
Well, perfect. That's everything we had in terms of topics for the meeting today. The only other thing we wanted to touch base on, Maggie and the task force, we're going to go ahead and put together all the press release stuff and get that rolling. Do y'all want to meet before we do that, or do you want us just to send it out and say this is what we're sending and collect input that way? I'm happy to do it either way. I just wanted to give you all the option.
My personal feeling is just update us via email that it's going so that we're aware and we can spread it, proliferate it, how, to help. But I think if we're trying to meet and we're trying to do this after the first of the year, that but that's just my thought. I think we could save the meeting for maybe some of the feedback that we get from the press release before GAC. I think is GAC at the end of February or beginning of March, either way.
Yeah, very beginning of March.
Yeah, so I think I would prefer, a little not so close to that, but at least we'd have some feedback from the press release and some of the release of the information. Anybody else? Does anybody want to meet before they send that out?
No, but I do agree with you, Maggie. Your points are correct. I agree with you.
Love that. All right, Matt, you got your answer.
Well, perfect. Yeah. And just double checking, I know we had one thing from Deborah. We're going to follow up with Jonathan. Do you need anything else at all based on the input from the task force today? Just before we jump off the call, I just want to make sure if there's anything else you need clarification on, we ask one more time.
No, none that I can think of. I would like to, and you'll have to forgive me, I can't remember her name. If she would, the one with the biometric question, if she'd be kind enough to, share the workflow and the fact pattern and see if there's anything that we can add or do to assist.
Yeah, I will connect y'all.
Deborah.
I'll connect y'all via email. That's no problem.
Yeah, thank you.
And Jonathan, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. It's super helpful.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Happy to help. Anything I can do, please let me know.
All right, everybody. We move forward. Thank you all so much. I should have said this at the top, but thank you so much for all your help. This has been invaluable, and we keep making progress. So that's good. We'll keep pushing it forward, and we'll keep you up to date on when we get this out to the public. You'll all be included on that. I'm sure you'll see the emails go out when we send it internally to all the members. So thank you so much. If you have anything, if you need anything, if you happen to be, I know Maggie went on a run to think about stuff the other day. If you happen to be out on a run or out on a stroll and you think of something and you want to email it to me, please go for it or give me a call. So we appreciate it. Have a great day. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Thank you. And Matt, is this recording going to go out to us to review?
Yeah, I'll have the recording will go out and then we put it on a private YouTube thing. So you can access it if you're like a member and things like that. So
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
thank you.
Thank you.